Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer who lost a horse, ran away. And all the neighbors came round that evening and said, "That's too bad." And he said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back and brought 7 wild horses with it. And all the neighbors came around and said, "Why, that's great, isn't it?" And he said, "Maybe." The next day, his son was attempting to tame one of these horses and was riding it and was thrown and broke his leg. And all the neighbors came round in the evening and said, "Well, that's too bad, isn't it?" The farmer said, "Maybe." And the next day, the conscription officers came around looking for people for the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And all the neighbors came round at the evening and said, "Isn't that wonderful?" And he said, "Maybe." It is really impossible to tell whether anything that happens is good or bad, because you never know what will be the consequences of a misfortune, or you never know what will be the consequences of good fortune.
What is up, YouTube? Live via satellite here, and today we are talking Kingdom, Manga chapter 555. And today, guys, after that chapter, a bunch of maybes is all I have for you guys. Because maybe this is going down, maybe that's going down. At this point, I really don't know. I mean, what blows my mind, what really blows my mind is this food situation. Knowing the person that Osen is, right? Knowing that he would never put himself in a situation where he doesn't have 100% certainty that he can win. None of this makes any sense. So even though I see all of these things going wrong, I just can't accept it. I mean, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm in denial. I mean, the truth is sometimes hard to accept.
So some total jerkwad just said that my laugh was gross. So I turned around and I said, "Yeah, well, your face is gross."
Alright, so the chapter starts out with us surprisingly back with the Kanki army at Gyo. And you can tell from everyone's expressions that something just isn't right about these armies that are off in the distance. And we soon find out what that is because Marin rides up to Kanki, letting him know that none of the armies are attacking and that they're all pretty much content to simply surround them and wait in silence. Which he says pretty much confirms the fact that Gyo's food supply will outlast theirs. Inside, we see that everyone is still hungry, but they are still actually able to get some food, and believe that they only need to hold out just a bit longer until the Quinn are defeated. But we do see that the hunger has people frustrated, but with any arguments that break out, it seems like the soldiers are quick to get them back in line. Then back outside, we see that Marin's asking Kanki if they've received any messages, but Kanki brings up the fact that they wouldn't be able to receive any messages because any messengers will get killed on their way. Hearing this, Marin brings up the only 2 points that could ensure the Kanki army's survival, which are that either army, the Yotama or Osen army, were to defeat their enemy and then somehow bring them a huge supply of food. And with a very serious face, Marin asks Kanki to promise him just one thing. The moment they have just a single day of rations remaining, they lift their siege on Gyo and begin an immediate withdrawal. And Kanki, surprisingly relaxed, tells him sure, but only if they reach that point. Then we move over to the Sukai Plains, where we see that the Zhao armies are doing the exact same thing over there. But while all the other men seem hungry and tired, Bihei is using his time wisely, yelling half-hearted taunts at the Zhao army to try to get them to attack. Which I found hilarious because we all know Bihei does not want any of that work. And he better be careful what he asks for.
I'm finna take this bit, I'm finna fuck you up. Don't go down there, man. What's up, man? Jeff, don't do it, Jeff. Jeff! Jeff, I'm knock him out. Don't do it. I told you. Cold. Cold.
And then we move over to the Akko HQ, where it seems like 10 is just thinking aloud about the situation that they're currently in and how they're really gonna have to put some serious thought into their strategy moving forward, where Ohan quickly checks her not to just think she can come in and take charge. But 10 responds with what I was actually thinking in my head as well, you call that trying to take charge? But he pretty much just ignores her and goes on to talk to General Akko, stating that with Moten barely hanging on to a stalemate in the left wing, that it's going to be up to them in the right wing to defeat their enemy if they have any hope of winning this battle, on top of which they only have 4 to 5 days of food remaining. And after listening to Ohan go on and on, Shin can't help but to think that he's the one trying to act in charge now. Ohan is such a hypocrite.
Drugs are for idiots, and I'm never going to be that person.
I'm in the club, high up perk.
But then Ohan goes on to say something pretty interesting, which is that they would need to defeat their opponents within the next 3 days, then combine with the center army to defeat Riboku in 1 day, and use their last day of food to head towards Gyo and regroup the Kanki army. But Shin brings up a valid point that even if everything went to plan like Ohan says, they would still run out of food. But Ohan brings up with Riboku defeated, it at least opens up some options, and that they could get some food from the small cities and villages on their way to Gyo, which Shin of course doesn't agree with. But Ohan says that even Shin has to understand that this is no time for him to be holding a moral high ground, which Ten has to agree with. And she actually does the smart thing and tries to negotiate with Shin, letting him know that they can actually do it in a fair way where they split the food and even take records of the food that they take. But she has no response when Shin brings up a valid point that what if they refuse to share their food with them? But before this argument can go any further, it's brought to a quick end by the Akko Army deputy Gune, simply stating that that's not a matter for them to decide anyway. That's something that will be left to the Supreme Commander Osen. The only thing they need to be concerned with is about how to slaughter their enemies. And we can see that there's some sort of past between Banyo and Gune, and that he holds some sort of level of respect for him. And Gune gets right back to the point, saying how does Ohan intend to defeat Zhao's left wing in the next 3 days? And Ohan goes on to say that there's no way to defeat the Zhao army's left wing in one move because all of their commanders are on equal terms. There's no clear-cut leader. So defeating one won't destroy the chain of command. But Ohan says that they can use this lack of hierarchy as a weakness, being that there's no one general to oversee them all at once, that it would actually be easier for them to pick them off one at a time. So the way the plan would work would be for them to take out one army on the first day, and on the second day, take out a second army, and on the third day, take out the final 2 remaining armies. So since their top priority is to take out one army today, Gune asks Ohan does he have any particular target in mind. And Ohan says the one who could be seen as the weakest of the 4 armies is Gakue. And that question was such a layup because everyone and their mom knows that Gakue is the weakest of the bunch, except of course Gakue. He has trouble seeing things that everyone else can.
Miners and hoes. No.
And with that, Akko gives his blessing to Ohan's plan and says that the Haishin unit along with the Gyokuho unit will both be entrusted to take out Gakue, which both of them immediately respond with just one of them would be enough. But Akko quickly shuts them down, saying no, that they cannot afford failure on their part, and that the 2 of them will strike Gakue together, and that today he must die, and that as the commander of the right wing, those are his orders. And after a brief stare down, Shin is shocked to see Ohan fall in line and say that Ohan of the Gyokuho shall do his part. Ten brings up the question that everybody else had to be wondering about. If Ohan and Shin are both to take down Gakue, then how are they going to handle the other 3 armies? And Akko says that his army will take care of that. And Gune even brings up the point that the Akko army still has strength to spare and should be able to hold them down easily. And that all Ohan and Shin need to do is focus on their part. And Akko wants them to also keep in mind that their target is not only Gakue, but they must also take his entire army out of the game. And with that, he tells them to go. And as everyone's leaving, Gune tries to catch up with Banyo, and they begin to conversate about Ohan. And Gune is basically complimenting him on how great of a job he did raising Ohan. And he says that him, along with many others, always felt remorseful that the job was left to him alone. But even still, he's thankful that it was him, because thanks to that, he was able to grow up to be an upstanding man. And this causes Banyo to break down in tears. But Gune is impressed that Banyo can cry at a time like this. Obviously, Gune does not know Banyo. Anytime Ohan's name is mentioned, it usually brings him to tears. He's just way too emotional.
Layla, why are you crying? Who's drowning? The fish are swimming. Layla, they're fine.
But Gune does feel in his heart that Ohan is a valuable treasure of the O family. And he asks Banyo to keep up the job that he's been doing supporting him, which Banyo agrees to, saying that even if it costs him his life, he will. And as they go off their separate ways, they wish each other luck, knowing that from this day forward, it's do or die. And as we see Ohan and Shin beginning to set off to take Gakue's head, we find out from the narrator that their plan to take his head, unbeknownst to them, would prove to backfire spectacularly against the Quinn forces. And the reason for that would be none other than Riboku. and we see him along with Kane meeting in secret with Bananji. And as they meet, Riboku apologizes to Bananji for having him leave his men to come out there, but since there really wasn't much going on, Bananji says it wasn't a big deal, and actually invites Riboku to come back to the HQ since it's not too much further away, probably so they can have a few drinks. But Kane butts in saying that Riboku doesn't have time for that, which Bananji takes as an insult. But Riboku does notice that Bananji's condition remains normal, which Bananji admits to, saying that he fights and he fights, but it appears that the rage that he has right now is nothing compared to the rage that he has when he fights against the Zhengnu. But Kane wants to know what type of man allows himself to be controlled by his condition, especially when they're in the middle of a war, mocking him, saying that, and he calls himself the Demon of Gammon. But in Bananji's case, he says that's exactly the reason why, but he wouldn't expect someone like Kane to understand. But Riboku does understand the fact that Bananji is still in this condition means that they're in a position of strength. And Bananji cuts to the chase, asking Riboku what brings him out here. And Riboku says that he noticed something while observing the battlefield the past few days. And since he feels like the Quinn are about to make a move today, he rushed over to share that information with Bananji. And Bananji asks Riboku, and what would that be? And Riboku says, the Akko army's weakness. And that was the chapter in a nutshell, guys. And this was an excellent chapter of Kingdom, guys. I mean, I really enjoyed this chapter. We got to see all different perspectives of the battlefields. And even though I kind of wanted to wrap things up with the Yotama battlefield, I understand why we have to move over here, because we need to kind of hit the climax of all the different battlefields kind of around the same time. And this chapter really covered a lot. I mean, if you think about it, we got a lot of different storylines going in this chapter. And coming away from this chapter, I feel like we got a lot more questions than we got answers. Because now you got to kind of start to wonder, will Kanki actually abandon Gyo? And if you guys didn't see my Kanki's weakness video, I'll put a link at the top of the screen because it's kind of old. I made it back in October. But in that video, I actually did bring up the point that Kanki could possibly abandon Gyo. And even if it doesn't happen, I'm really just glad that they kind of touched on the possibility that Kanki would be willing to do that if things got too out of control. But at the moment, Kanki really doesn't look too bothered. But I don't think this is due to any sort of plan that Kanki has. I just think he really doesn't care, to be honest with you. I think that no matter what happens, Kanki is only really concerned about him and his army. So whether things work out in this war or don't, I think his confidence stems from the fact that he knows he'll be able to survive. But inside the city, things aren't as good as you would think. Even though they're supposed to have enough food to outlast Quinn, it does appear that they're rationing it in such small portions that the people are still kind of hungry, and you can actually see that people are starting to get a bit testy. It kind of reminds me back with the Mountain Tribe when they were starting to fight amongst themselves because they were getting so hungry. And the last thing I wanted to talk about on this battlefield is the time limit that Kanki's now under. He agrees with Marin to abandon Gyo when they have 1 day of food left, and if you take a closer look at Ohan's plan, he plans to arrive in Gyo right before the Kanki army runs out of food to resupply them. But at that point, the Kanki army could be long gone. So it kind of just looks like everything's going to hell. But on top of all of this, we still have to deal with the fact that Shin doesn't want to pillage any of the cities as they're on their way to Gyo. Which in this instance, I gotta side with Ohan because they're gonna have to do whatever it takes to survive. So I understand that Shin has his morals, but this is war, and war isn't always pretty. Especially since in a way, they already kind of did this when they were attacking all the other cities and sending the refugees to Gyo, and they were taking their food supplies. So in order to survive, Shin's probably gonna have to just get over this one. So another really interesting thing this chapter was the introduction of Gune. And I really like the conversation that he had with Banyo because we actually get to see a little bit more into this past that Ohan has. I mean, obviously there's some sort of backstory that explains this relationship between Ohan and Osen. And when you think about it, there's nothing Ohan really could have done because he was a child at the time. So I'm really interested to find out why Osen has shunned him even so early in his childhood. And if I had to take a guess, the only thing I could really think of is perhaps Ohan's mother died in childbirth and Osen blames Ohan for her death, something of that nature. But no matter what it is, it's about time we start to find out because like we have been teased with this storyline for a long time and nobody is letting us in on what's going on. Even Ohan's actions this chapter when he was having a stare down with Akko, it was even uncharacteristic for him to follow those orders without a fight. And I actually think that this Gune guy is kind of powerful because it looks like Banyo actually really admires this guy. And if I had to take another guess about the Akko army's weakness, I would actually think it would be Gune. And that may be who Riboku is trying to target, because he may be such an important part of that Akko army. Especially when you take a look back at the chapter, he was the one doing a lot of the talking in that meeting. And he was also the one hinting at the strength that the Akko army has to spare, and also saying that it'll be easy enough for them to hold off those 3 armies. And I also found it interesting while Riboku was talking to Bananji about this weakness, that it also seemed like he was suggesting that Bananji has been holding back this entire time. Apparently because he's not enraged enough like he is when he's fighting against the Zhongnu. It's almost as if they're saying like Bananji has some sort of like berserker mode that he'll go into when he's really enraged. Kane even suggested that they call him a demon in Gammon. But finally, it does seem like Akko may not be long for this world. Even though I think they're going to target Gune first, I still think it could ultimately end in Akko's death. And if he dies, I can see a similar situation to how they had on Moten's side of the battlefield, where perhaps Shin and Ohan are promoted to generals. But you never know, because Osen does have a bullpen of generals that he has at his disposal. But if it really does go down that way, it would be nice to see Ohan, Shin, Kyokai, and Ten working together to try to take all of the generals out on that battlefield. But anyway guys, that about does it for this week's review. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter in the comment section below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Feel free to share, comment, and subscribe. Peace out!